My head is hurting, everything is spinning. Where am I? Did I travel back in time? Why the heck am I here? And why do I feel this inexplicable emptiness? It's like a void that always accompanies me after overworking. Huh? What's this? Is there a tetanus blade here? Is that blood? No, wait a minute. Damn, did they really cut me? My kidney. They took my kidney. I need to call the police. I need to report this. Damn. So yeah, folks, the story has started off very strange, but hold on, it's gonna get worse. And at this moment, our protagonist starts to have a glimpse of his memories. Dr. Lin, wasn't it just for you to remove the kidney? The situation is bad. The price of kidneys has dropped a lot. They told us to take everything we could. Wait a minute, Dr. Lin, do you mean you're gonna empty him out? Is that a problem for you? Damn, they took everything from the protagonist, man. I just want to ask, if they emptied him out, how is he still alive? And to make matters worse, the dial button was completely bugged, and on his screen there was a game icon. But since Prota had lost a lot of blood, his head started spinning crazily, and out of nowhere, he began to say, "Mercy, my great-grandmother. I'm seeing my great-grandmother. Oh my god, I don't want to die yet." But that great-grandmother in front of him might not have been his real great-grandmother. And with nothing else to do, he just clicked on that app called World of Desire. However, he barely knew what he was doing. So they ask us a question, and I hope you answer in the comments. What is your forbidden desire? That which death cannot stop, where the barrier of desire and life is unstoppable. In other words, what is your greatest wish? But in our case, we're fine, right? Unlike Prota, who was simply facing that situation with a strange aura around him. And on his phone screen appeared a notification saying, "Will you hear the blessings of God?" And he ended up clicking yes, wishing to live, find his kidney, and regain his strength. However, I think he wished to the wrong person. And at that moment, the priest finds himself in a totally new place, or more specifically, in a world of desire. But he thought he was in the game he had clicked on earlier. First, the good news. He was still alive, but the bad news is that he had no organs. Now I ask, how is he still standing, right? But let's go. And out of nowhere, a light shines into his eyes. And from the silhouette, I was already thinking it was the famous Truckkuin, and I thought he was going to another ice guy. But it was actually his cousin, the bus. From the bus, the 10th woman, Prota declares, UI, good night, love. But he forgot to look up, and she didn't seem very happy with the comment. Prota corrected himself saying, it's okay. The top part doesn't work, so I'll call you Black Silk Girl. But the woman was there staring at him, and he didn't understand anything. And Prota questioned if she wanted him to have some money. Well, his whole body was empty. What else could he lose? Could it be his dignity? Or maybe she had a way to kill a man who was already dead. But you can't kill something that's already dead, so he was fine. And at that moment, that strange woman there ordered Prota to get on the bus. So Prota said, sure, let me see what's going on here. But first, you should ask politely. For example, say, young master, please get on the bus. Okay, now I don't understand anything. I think he didn't just lose his internal organs. I think his brain was taken too. And since it seems she didn't hear, he repeated again, tell me, young master, please get on the bus. But I think he forgot he was wearing that patient outfit and almost let his bird fly. And the vision the woman had there must not have been so good. After all, she was crying blood. And she opened her mouth so wide it looked like she was going to devour Prota literally. But seeing this, our protagonist declared, I'm an organless person. Should I be afraid of this? And out of nowhere, my friends, the guy is crazy. He slapped her so hard that her head spun around twice. And for the third time, he said, come on, tell me, young master, please get on the bus. At this, the woman declared she had been very careless. But Prota was still there. So, are you gonna say it or not? And with great hatred, she did it, but she did it. And Prota was cheeky, okay? He even commented, yeah, that's how I like it. And the moment he passes through the bus door, his clothes change. He even looked like a magnate. And it was at this moment that the gears of fate began to turn. But unlike Prota's clothes, the bus internally was in very bad shape. But the worst seemed to be the people. In this, Prota finds a seat where there was a woman next to him. Approaching her, he already started his chat asking, hello miss, what will be the name of our children? Damn, the guy doesn't forgive even after death, he's crazy. However, at this moment, that aunt who received Prota starts to say, welcome to the world of desire. Listen to the whispers of the gods. The gods say, your challenge will begin now. It's a change of scenery in the real world at the same time in an abandoned factory. A doctor, probably that Mr. Lin, was carrying the protagonist's organs. And approaching a Ferrari, a woman asked if he had taken everything. And Mr. Lin said she didn't need to worry because he had done everything right. Licking his lips, he said, you did very well. However, out of nowhere, she pointed a gun at the doctor's head and said, next time, don't do anything wrong, okay? And another one was killed. In this, that woman there grabs Prota's heart and kind of starts to devour it. How disgusting. exhausting. And back on the bus, that crazy woman was saying that the first challenge was called abandonment. And the task was simple, so they should listen carefully. In 10 minutes, they would cross a red bridge. And that bridge was too broken to support all of them. And if it collapses, everyone will die. But if only one person leaves that bus, they could cross the bridge safely. So they could either vote for who should leave or force someone out. Only those who completed this final challenge would have their wishes granted. Since they didn't have much time, they needed to start right away. Then Proda asked the same question I did. How can he die? Isn't he already dead? And at that moment, a woman started to plead. Please don't make me go. My child hasn't been born yet, and I can't die. With that statement, chaos erupted. One person had cancer, another had a child in the ICU. Many people started declaring why they couldn't get off the bus. Then Proda thought, damn, you all have such serious reasons. Compared to that, my desire to get my organs back doesn't seem trivial. However, an old man began to declare that time was limited, so they should vote quickly. From a rational standpoint, the first to be eliminated should be the weakest link. So he voted for that pregnant woman. And since someone had already taken the initiative, the herd mentality kicked in, and everyone started saying she should die. Of course, the woman was desperate, being pregnant and needing to care for her unborn child. She questioned if they were really human. However, the old man declared that this was everyone's desire. They all had a wish to fulfill. She shouldn't pretend to be a victim. After all, she was using her pregnancy to morally blackmail them into letting someone else die in her place. She threw fuel on the fire, and people started exploding with anger and saying all sorts of things. The woman sank deeper into despair, not knowing what to do. Still, she begged them not to throw her off the bus. At that moment, the bus door opened, and many people tried to push her out. The crazy woman started shouting, "Hurry up, the bridge is almost here." But looking at her face, Proda realized she seemed to have achieved her goal. Maybe she was seeking something else. Meanwhile, the woman was almost falling off the bus, begging for mercy from the people inside, who just laughed at her. But our Proda held her and declared, "Didn't you say it was a vote? Well, I haven't voted yet." But everyone argued against Proda, saying they had all declared that the woman should get off the bus. However, Proda insisted that their logic was flawed from the start, because Black Silk Girl said someone had to leave, but she never said it had to be one of them. Hearing this, she was shocked and started saying, "Come on, there's less than a minute left for the party. If you don't throw her out, everyone will die." Seeing her reaction, Proda realized he was right. Even the old man agreed with him, so Proda warned him to be careful with his words. After all, everything he said influenced everyone there. Since she wasn't part of the group, she should be thrown out, so they voted again. In the end, the one chosen to be expelled was none other than Black Silk Girl. My god, what a stupid name the protagonist gave her. I'm just calling her that because she doesn't have a name. I don't even know the protagonist's name yet for you to understand the level. This work is totally hidden from us. I'm just going with the flow. So they asked her to leave the bus. However, she declared they couldn't force her out. But Proda began saying, "When I got on the bus, I slapped you, and you didn't even turn around. So, if I'm not mistaken, by some rule, you can't harm the passengers, right? Boy, the guy is a thinker. I thought he still had a brain, right? But that was the only thing left of him. Well, at the beginning, he almost let his bird fly. At that moment, the woman lunged at Proda, calling him insolent. But Proda simply stopped her with another slap, saying, "How can someone like you be on the same bus as me? Get out of here, girl." With that, they managed to cross the bridge. Strange letters started to appear on the glass, saying, "Next stop, crying nightfall." Then the passengers started talking among themselves, realizing they had probably passed a stage. But out of nowhere, an aura began to envelop Proda. A strange symbol appeared, accompanied by an equally strange voice saying, "Young man, you boarded the bus, so you get a bonus." What Proda received was an evil spirit ticket. With this, he would gain the power of evil spirits. Apparently, it was some kind of summoning item. But for someone who had nothing in life, obviously, he would keep it because he deserved it, right? At that moment, the bus stopped, shocking everyone. Proda asked if the next game was planned. In front of the bus was a large building. The first, of course, was the first to get out. But as the others began to exit, the pregnant woman found a strange item. At the same time, in the real world, a woman stood before a broken mirror, saying, "Why is this happening? No, this isn't me. If only I could return to my original form. It's all his fault. I want him dead. I want him dead." Back in the world of desire, the pregnant woman was startled by a doll in front of her. Well, I'd be scared too. I'm afraid of dolls, you know? Her fear was so great that she even kicked the poor doll. At this, the protagonist declared that she was very scared to be afraid of a doll. After everyone left the bus, they began wondering what to do since the bus was still leaving. And another thing, it was uncertain if they could survive. The place they arrived at was called the Old House, stained with blood. So, if no one had died before, now for sure someone would. Just by the name alone, it was scary. And like the last time, probably this time there would be some kind of instructor to show what the objective of this phase would be. A woman appeared and said, "So you are the volunteers for this moment? I am the director here, so follow me." Entering that kind of nursing home, the woman declared they had arrived just in time, as those elderly people were hungry. Out of nowhere, a woman approached Proda, hugging him, and Proda said she needed to stay calm, no need to be so scared. But back to the woman's explanation. She declared that each of them was responsible for 3 rooms, and on each door, there were instructions left by the children who took care of them previously. Therefore, they must follow these instructions carefully. If they broke the rules, they would face the consequences. Then she gave them a tour of the place, showing a lot of things, but I'll skip that. Then they reached the main hall. Out of nowhere, she threw several papers into the air, saying that this would be their task for the day. They couldn't wait any longer. Oh, and she left one last piece of advice. After dark, they should stay in their rooms and not leave. It was also not recommended to sleep deeply during the night. So, Proda was assigned to room 203. His task was to deliver food to the elderly, but he complained that the director hadn't said anything about salaries. The door had a few instructions saying, mute, irritable, dirty, fully cooked. Wow, what instructions. Precisely surgical, my friend. And to top it off, how can a professional get something without declaring volunteer work? And since he had to deliver food to the elderly, he had to go to the kitchen first. As he descended the stairs, since it was on the first floor, he felt like he was being watched. While walking down the hallway, an evil aura emanated from him. Seeing this in front of him, the protagonist thought that if he wasn't careful, it could be a threat to his life. The tasks seemed almost the same, as there were already many people in the kitchen. Proda wasn't very good at making pretty dishes. He just planned to make a steak for the old man. Meanwhile, a chubby guy was talking to that old man from before, saying he saw blood coming out of the door of room 101. The old man said that his task was also to clean the room, and it seemed like someone had been eaten in that room. But the old man didn't care, he just asked for some meat with pepper. Proda was just observing the conversation, and the old man kept saying, "This is not my first time in the world of desire, but each challenge is different, so I don't know how to avoid the dangers. However, I can warn you, while I was cooking the steak, guys, the steak, whatever your wish is, if you reach the end, I advise you not to try to resurrect the dead." When asked why he couldn't do that, he replied, "The dead cannot come back to life. After all, how can you be sure that the person resurrected that way is still the same person?" A guy asked if he was implying that whoever resurrected would become a ghost, but the old man said he didn't know, but they certainly wouldn't be human. He also understood that only those who were near death or had extreme desires entered the world of desires, and it was obvious that this was hard for them to believe. But he advised them, when you are consumed by desire, death is actually a release. Back to room 203. Proda knocked on the door, but no one answered. Well, what did he expect? It was already written on the door that the old man was mute. He then calmly opened the door and, when he saw the old man, he was completely finished. However, Proda didn't care and just placed the plate of food on the table. The old man quickly lunged for the plate, eating non-stop. Seeing this, Proda commented that his task seemed quite simple and he really got a bit lucky. But out of nowhere, he was attacked by the old man. He was hit right in the stomach and started to speak. If you didn't like the food, you just had to say so. No need to keep eating other people's stomachs or trying to grab a person's heart. The man even tried to find an organ inside Proda, but there was nothing, which obviously surprised him. In these thoughts, he questioned if Proda was really human. Seeing this, Proda declared, "You must be joking with me, right, old man? Who would have thought that even after death you'd be fooling around, alive or dead? Seems like there's always someone who wants a piece of me. Do you think I'm a Lego doll, and you feel like playing with parts of my body? And besides, why are you so picky about food? You don't eat what they give you? Why don't you answer me? Why don't you beg for mercy?" The monster even tried to say something, but as it was written on the door, he was mute. With a smile, Proda declared, "Oh dear, I don't understand you." However, at that moment, the pregnant woman opened the door at the wrong time. The sight before her was totally terrifying, and of course, seeing this, she fainted. However, Proda didn't care and continued talking to the old man. "If it weren't for the task you're asking me, I'd really smash your head. Or better, I think I'll kill you." But the skill he used with the summoning talisman simply ended. He was extremely annoyed because it only lasted 3 minutes. Well, that wasn't a problem, he could summon again, but no, because there was a 3-hour cooldown to use it again. Well, it makes sense, right? Summoning a strong spirit like that, putting everyone on your side wasn't very normal, right? His attitude towards the old man changed dramatically. He even started showing affection, saying it was okay. It was all misunderstood. It was all madness in his head. The old man, still afraid afraid of Proda, just agreed with everything. A while later, the pregnant woman woke up, but I think Proda doesn't understand personal space, and he approached her saying, "Oh, you're awake." To make things worse, he started pushing her into the room as if he was about to do something to her. And to worsen the situation, he began saying, "Shut up, don't be afraid. Actually, I'm taking care of a very boring task. Knowing too much isn't good for you. Know that I'm a nice guy, so please keep this a secret." Given what she had seen before, the only thing she could say was that she wouldn't tell anyone. So Proda asked if she needed anything from him. She grabbed Proda's feet and began saying that she needed his help, that she would do anything he asked. Looking at her, Proda remembered that place was dangerous, and since his summoning ticket was on cooldown, he needed to be careful. With that, he agreed to help her, but he couldn't guarantee he'd complete the task because he didn't want to risk his life. The woman then explained that her task was to help a woman take a bath. And then we have a jump of an hour. In the middle of the corridor, several people were complaining. One of them said that a crazy woman bit his ear, saying his cleaning wasn't complete. Another had the task of massaging an old man's back, but the old man's back was simply rotten. In short, it was a practically impossible task. At that moment, the old man from the beginning appeared. Apparently, his task wasn't easy either, as he lost one of his legs. He declared that he had been bitten, but thank God he wasn't dead. At that moment, the director arrived, shouting, "What are you doing? Are your tasks completed?" Looking at her, the people thought it was strange because she was covered in blood. Given the situation, they assumed she had eaten someone. Moreover, the tasks she gave them were practically impossible. But the director declared that it didn't matter if they finished the tasks. Even if they were useless, they were now volunteers, and the elderly liked them. From her words, everyone realized she certainly wasn't human. However, she quickly changed the subject, pointing at the woman and Proda in the back, asking if they were hiding because they didn't want to appear. But Proda declared, "No, dear director, we're here to see you. In reality, we were stunned by your beauty. We couldn't move because of it. But since you're asking so kindly, I'll come closer." But the director commented that it wasn't his place to talk nonsense. She was there to remind everyone that if the tasks weren't completed and there were complaints, she'd have to follow the rules. With 2 hours left until nightfall, those who hadn't finished their tasks should hurry, as the elderly didn't like to wait. She got very close to Proda and said, "By the way, I'll see you tonight." But man, Proda's screwing up. He didn't waste time, and this time he wasn't the aggressor. Proda was wary, not wanting to become their slave. He wondered if she had seen something of the spirit he was using. With that, the director simply left, leaving everyone in the corridor. Since it seemed like the director was close to Proda, they wondered if his task was easier than the others and asked if he had any tips for them. The old man was behind this, and Proda realized he was very good at moral blackmail, just like before, shifting the focus of the situation to just one person. Out of nowhere, Proda shouted, "Shut up, all of you. I hate moral blackmail." He took the pregnant woman's hand and declared they should leave him alone. None of them had any idea how to complete the missions. However, the old man was good with words and began to declare, "Look, I don't have any clues now, but you want to know about the world of desire, right?" Of course, Proda was aware of that. So the old man began to say, "I'm willing to share my last experience in the world of desire in exchange for clues. This information will surely help you achieve your desires. After all, this game revealed the truth of the world of desire to me." And so we're transported to a memory of the old man, where someone was being beaten by several boys. One of the men said it was just a reminder from that time, in case he didn't pay the money. Next time, his legs wouldn't stay with him. Since we're telling the old man's story, we must call him by his name, right? His name is Lu Changyu. He ended up in this state because he got addicted to games and fell into debt. Because of that, he was often beaten to death by debt collectors. One day, that thing appeared, and later he entered the world of desires and completed a challenge. At that time, his desire was money, and he needed 1 million. After returning to the real world, his wish came true. But his father accidentally fell from a high place at a construction site where he worked and ended up in a vegetative state. He received compensation of exactly 1 million. His wish was indeed granted. However, the price was his father. Until now, his father was in the hospital. Because of his damned wish, his father ended up in a vegetative state. Based on this information, it seemed that the way of fulfilling desires wouldn't come from the beyond but would happen reasonably. Since Proda's wish is to recover his organs, it might be that the organs he needed would already be deteriorated. Or perhaps it could trigger some event where the organs are recovered from the person who received the transplant. So, in the end, when he makes his wish, he needs to avoid these bad outcomes as much as possible. That's why the old man was asking for help, because each of them was responsible for 3 rooms, and he had already lost a leg in the first one, so he begged for help. But how was Proda going to help? Because the only thing he did was hit the guy with the help of that talisman, and without it, he would probably die. Proto declared that he had found a mechanism within the game, but he didn't know how to activate it. So the only thing he could do was wish them good luck. But that wasn't really the truth. He just needed to ask the old man some questions. He hoped the old man had some clues. Talking to him, he found the old man totally scared in the corner of the room. The pregnant woman questioned Proto why he hadn't helped the people earlier. But Proto responded, "What are you talking about? At that moment, they clearly left you behind on the road. And now you're talking about them." But the woman began to say that if it were really necessary to abandon someone at that moment, she might have made the same choice they did. After all, she also had desires she needed to fulfill. Her husband was a firefighter. Not long ago, he lost his life in a rescue operation. But their child had a malformed lung, and since they only had this one child, even though the doctor said the baby would be deformed and wouldn't survive, she would do everything she could to keep the baby. So when they complete her challenge, everything would get better, right? Proto replied that yes, it would get better. In his mind, he reflected that the child ended up being a hero's descendant. But putting that aside, he called the old man to come closer because he had something to ask. Then he asked a strange question that I didn't really understand. I don't know if it was my translation, but he said, "Leniency for those who confess, but is there truth for those who resist? Understand? Why the hell did you dig me up now? Tell me." See, I didn't understand anything he was saying, but let's see what happens. As he remembered, the director said the message outside the door was left by the elderly's children. However, from what the old man wrote there, he didn't like to eat well-done meat, contrary to what was written on the door. In short, what was written on the door was nothing more than a trap. The pregnant woman asked Proto if he understood anything. He affirmed that he had analyzed it but wasn't sure if he was correct. The woman just affirmed that she trusted Proto. In appreciation for his help, she would test the clues for him. After all, if it weren't for Proto, she would have been dead long ago. So Proto declared to her that the information on the door was totally wrong. The woman simply left, and Proto began to reflect in his mind if Lu Chongyu's words were all true. So, through this method, even if her child survived, would the child really be healthy? Forget it, I need to think about what I'll do tonight. Although the director is really impressive, she doesn't seem human. Actually, humans can't, or at least shouldn't. I don't know, my head hurts. 2 hours later, the mission finally ended, and he was wondering if Yunli, the pregnant woman, had completed the mission. But in the end, it wasn't the pregnant woman who opened the door, but the director. Even the old man, who was as scared as a rabbit, kneeled before her. Proto thought he should pretend to be dead to avoid getting caught. However, she began to declare, "Why are you standing there? Let's go. Let's take a trip with your Nana." For those who don't know, Nana is like an older brother, you know? Something like that, but Nana is a nicer way to say it. But Proto wasn't very confident about going with her. After all, his passage was still on cooldown, and the director was clearly stronger than the old man. Considering everything happening now, he was screwed. However, to maintain his innocence, he had to find a way to deceive her. So he began to declare, "Oh, director, I would love to be with you, but actually, I'm a man without a motor. My V12 motor was taken by bad people. Actually, both motors disappeared. Bad people did this so I couldn't love anymore. They did this so I couldn't love anymore." The director approached him, asking if what was in his chest was a zipper. Damn, Liz, a zipper? A zipper? Proto even asked if that was a zipper in her family. However, the director ignored him and said the volunteers responsible for room 401 and the old man were leaving, so he should find them and then sleep. However, Proto still insisted, asking if he really had to go. After all, she had said before they needed to meet after dark. Didn't she want to? But the director asked, "What are you talking about, young man?" Proto quickly corrected himself, saying, "Oh no, I'll meet these young people quickly, my dear." The director said that if he met them, she wouldn't let him work for free. After all, the reward wasn't important. The main thing was to help the director share her concerns. In short, if he helped the director, he wouldn't have any work to do. From what Proto remembered, the person responsible for room 401 was that girl he met and sat next to on the bus. Speaking of which, he hadn't seen her among the crowd back then, so he didn't know if the director wanted him to find the girl or help collect the remaining bodies. But it wouldn't help him to keep thinking about it, so he just moved on. Strangely, the stairs started spinning, and he began to feel dizzy. Oddly enough, his footsteps were too loud. It didn't make sense, as he was wearing sports shoes. It sounded more like high heels clicking. At that moment, he heard footsteps approaching him, followed by a voice. "Look, I finally found you." Hearing this, Proto wondered if it was a ghost. But he didn't need to be afraid. After all, Proto didn't have organs. However, he needed to find a way to escape, so he started singing in desperation and quickly climbed the stairs. But that woman or ghost kept following him. The ghost asked Proto Prota to wait, placing her hand on his shoulder, which obviously froze Prota from head to toe. He began to question his mind. Do you think I'm your horse to ride on? No, I won't wait for death. I can only use my big treasure to scare her. Suddenly, he started saying really crazy things, and I didn't even know what he was talking about. What was he saying here? He claimed he was going to cast a spell, but I don't think he could do that since the ghost was holding his hand. The ghost approached him and asked, "What did you just say? Were you trying to exorcise me?" But Prota replied, No, it's not that. At the first chance, Prota ran away, finally finishing climbing the stairs, and that cold feeling disappeared. Looking back, he saw a hand retracting. He wondered if that ghost was broken, because when he climbed to the 3rd floor, there were only footsteps. As he got closer to the 4th floor, there was an extra tongue and hand. It seemed her body was scattered throughout the building, or rather, throughout the staircase. Maybe she was asking him to wait until she assembled her body. If that happened, he didn't even want to know the result. He commented, "Phew, that scared me. My heart was racing. Oh right, I don't have a heart." Reaching the 4th floor, Prota noticed there was no blood. The situation seemed much better than on the 2nd floor. He reached the door of room 401, and the instructions there were very strange. The note said that the girl's father had dementia and liked to play hide and seek with people, always hiding behind the curtains. Once someone starts playing with him, he never gets tired, so it's dangerous to play hide and seek with him. You should simply ignore him. Prota wondered, how could hide and seek be dangerous? If he followed the clues he had found, he should believe it. But if the opposite was true, then the solution to passing room 401 might be to play hide and seek with the elderly. He opened the room door, asking if anyone was there, but the room was empty. Moreover, there were no curtains as described on the door, so how could they play hide and seek? At the end of the corridor, there was a noise, and it was a person running. It was the girl he met on the bus, asking for his help. Prota questioned her about what was happening and where the old man she was supposed to take care of was. The girl replied that the old man insisted on playing hide and seek with her. However, the note on the door said not to play with him. Prota was surprised because the right thing should be to play with the old man, right? Or were the clues he analyzed wrong? If that was the case, the pregnant woman could already be dead. For hours, the girl had been playing with the old man. She found him, and he was indeed behind the curtain. When she found him, the old man asked to play again. However, the second time she found him, he was still hiding behind the same curtain as before, and there were actually two of them. The third time she found him, there was another one. In short, each time she won, another person appeared. There were so many behind the curtain that it barely fit the window. Suddenly, the girl threw herself into Prota's arms, saying he probably liked her, right? So they would be dating. Now that they were dating, he couldn't ignore her. But Prota responded that he wasn't there to save a damsel in distress, but to complete the mission the director had given him. Suddenly, the girl pushed him, saying, "You're my boyfriend, so you have to protect me from death." The girl ran away, saying she didn't want to hurt Prota, but she didn't want to die. Prota could only pity her. Even the pregnant woman had more control. It was actually good because that girl would only get in the way. So it was time to start playing. Opening the curtains, Prota saw several men, or actually tender hippos. They all declared at the same time that Prota had found them. As that happened, they could start playing again. But Prota replied that he would never play again. At that moment, the hippo lunged, saying, "Then it's time to end the game. I'll be the catcher this time." However, the protagonist wasn't in the mood to play around. He quickly activated his evil spirit, ready for a fight. "My friends." While the hippos were shouting, "I found you," the protagonist casually replied, "I found your mom." And just like that, he deleted one of the hippos. Obviously, there were many more, but the protagonist was handling them all. Suddenly, he was attacked from behind, and a hand went through his chest. But it didn't matter much because, after all, he didn't have organs. He was technically dead. He even asked the hippos if they were really playing tag with him. Our protagonist was furious, especially since he hated being excavated. For those who didn't catch that, it means they literally dug out all of his organs. So, for that reason, the only thing they deserved was death. A little while later, he had killed all the hippos. And actually, it didn't even take that long, just 3 minutes, because his evil spirit ability ended. In 3 minutes, I'd say he did pretty well, right? After all, he killed all of them. But if he had faced someone stronger, his evil spirit might have run out before defeating his enemy. Things got worse when the hippos started regenerating, and not only that, but their numbers doubled. Seeing this, the protagonist declared, "This must be a joke. No way." He was already calling for a timeout, saying that the moonlit night was too beautiful, and they should just enjoy it instead of fighting. Speaking of the moon, that's when the protagonist remembered why the hippo went crazy after the moon appeared. He recalled the words of the director, "After dark, stay in your room, and it's better not to sleep too deeply at night." But the protagonist is like a child, doing exactly the opposite of what he's told, and now now he's dealing with the consequences. Maybe the danger wasn't the night itself but that blood-red moon. I mean, it doesn't make sense that his room doesn't have curtains. Even if he had followed the director's advice to stay hidden in the room, those old hippos, they were just using them as food for those monsters. The protagonist then dropped a proverb from his homeland that I'm not familiar with. He said, "The cursed frog keeps patting its belly." I kind of get it, like the saying where the frog doesn't realize it's dying or in hot water. I think that's what he meant, but let me know if I'm wrong. At that moment, the protagonist simply jumped over all of them, grabbed the curtain, and closed it. After all, the hippos were being influenced by the moon, and just like that, they vanished, or rather, they melted. Out of nowhere, the remains of one old hippo appeared, and its final words were, "Let's play hide and seek." But the protagonist was already expecting that and approached him, saying it was too late for games. They could play again tomorrow. The old hippo said, "You can't lie to me," but I think he wasn't gonna make it because he was disappearing. I thought he was about to go for good. Anyway, after that excuse, the protagonist made a quick exit. He put up the curtain in the old guy's room, and after a while, everything was calm. He solved the problem with the old guy who kept hiding, but the blood moon was still in the sky. Because of it, he knew there could be other dangers if he moved now. If he had his evil spirit ability, he could use it, but it wouldn't be ready for another 3 hours. So, in the end, all he could do was wait. After that, a woman suddenly appeared. She was supposed to be the protagonist's girlfriend, but she pushed him right into the hippo man's arms, screaming for help, asking the protagonist to save her since they were dating. But at that moment, a hand grabbed her head, and she started getting dragged under the stairs. 3 hours later, the protagonist quickly went down the stairs. However, on the way, he found something a bit unpleasant: the remains of his sister, White Silk. He even thanked Buddha, saying, "Amitabha, thank goodness I didn't follow her." With everything he'd been through, he realized he could only rely on his own luck. Finally, the protagonist made it back to his room. The old guy wasn't crazy after all. Turns out, the elderly in the nursing home went mad when exposed to the blood moon, except for those who had already been beaten. After that, the protagonist got into bed and told the old man to write down exactly what he wanted to eat this time, since he didn't want to cook again, or else the old guy would get another beating. The old man wrote on the paper that he only wanted raw meat, to which the protagonist replied that he'd prepare him some large intestine tomorrow. Gross. Then he asked how the old man started liking that kind of thing. The old man responded that, in reality, he didn't like raw meat, but his son did. At that point, the protagonist realized that the old man had intentionally left all that meat behind to save it for his son. But it wasn't going to help much. It was all going to rot anyway. However, the old man responded that he didn't know when his son would return. This caught the protagonist by surprise, as the way the old man spoke made it clear he had been waiting for his son, but didn't realize he'd been left to die. So what exactly was this strange nursing home? Because the old man had left that raw meat for his son, it had obviously started to stink terribly. But the old man was doing it all out of love. Still, the whole situation felt bizarre, like everything in this world was upside down. This was the world of desires. And so, the first night ended in this nursing home called Corner of Blood. Once again, all the passengers from the bus were gathered at the entrance, and the protagonist noticed there were more people than the night before. He also bumped into the pregnant woman, which relieved him since he hadn't sent her to her death. In fact, from what she said, the protagonist's tips had worked. He said it was nothing, just advice, and when she asked if she could share it with others, he said he didn't mind. It was her discovery, after all. The pregnant woman wanted to say more, but the director suddenly appeared, announcing that there were still many people left, which wasn't a bad thing. She tossed papers into the air again, declaring that this would be their task for today. Licking her lips, she told the protagonist she was looking forward to seeing him again. By the way things were going, it seemed like the protagonist was going to be eaten, quite literally. As the protagonist stood there like a statue, the director called him over, stating that although the volunteer from room 401, the girl who wanted to be the protagonist's girlfriend, had died the previous night, he had managed to bring the old man back, which was good. For that, he would be rewarded. Of course, the protagonist started buttering her up, calling her a goddess that everyone needed. She didn't take kindly to the flattery, though, and yanked him by the collar, saying if she were all that, she'd pay him a visit that night. I think this is the first time a compliment backfired. His reward turned out to be some strange bills, which were probably the currency of the world of desires. The old man, who had already participated in this world, confirmed it. The currency was indeed only used in the world of desires, and its name? Super creative, Desire Coins. Even the protagonist joked about how boring the name was. However, the old man warned the protagonist not to underestimate those coins because players in the challenge literally killed each other for just 10 of them. Last time he did a trial, 3 people died in the end. The protagonist had plenty of them now, and the director had said she'd visit him that night. This made the old man suspicious of the protagonist's relationship with the director, but the protagonist quickly dismissed it, saying he was just following orders to help in room 401. Obviously, everyone was shocked, thinking it might have been a secret mission or that the protagonist had some clue on how to defeat the monsters. But the old man told everyone to shut up and added that the protagonist had shared information about the world of desires yesterday, so since he seemed to know something about the mission, he suggested they trade info. The protagonist had already expected that the old man was hiding something. At this point, the old man revealed that everyone in the group was from Linhai City. In short, all the people there came from the city of Linhai, meaning the world of desires attracted players regionally. The pregnant woman remembered something, turning to a little boy and mentioning that his father had been injured in a fire at Central Mall. The boy nodded and asked how she knew. She explained that her husband was named King Hong, and that's when the woman realized that this lady was the wife of Captain Hong. But the protagonist quickly broke the mood, saying they were all heroes and would be fine. This sparked a frenzy of people asking the protagonist for more information, leading to a heated argument about trading information. Internally, the protagonist was quite pleased because, originally, he had planned for the pregnant woman to share the clues, but he hadn't expected this extra benefit. Since there were so many advantages, he didn't see why he should refuse. So, he told everyone what had happened the previous night, but I won't repeat all that again. After explaining everything in detail, the protagonist moved on to his next task, which was in room 200. The task was simple, just like the last one. He had to clean the room. However, a note on the door read, "My mother has Alzheimer's and forgets things. She even forgets to go to the bathroom. Although she has a manic personality, she would never hurt anyone. So, volunteers, don't be afraid." But it seemed like even the person who wrote the note wasn't too confident, given what had happened before. Unlike me, who would be terrified, the protagonist just walked right in without hesitation. Strangely, there was no woman in sight, but suddenly, from the door, a bizarre monster emerged and quickly grabbed the protagonist by the neck, demanding to know where her daughter was. Seeing the strength of that old woman, the protagonist realized she was way too strong for her age. If he took too long, his neck would probably snap. What a bizarre monster. Looked like a cross between a frog and a lizard. The protagonist was even considering using his evil spirit, but then he remembered that the old lady had Alzheimer's and sometimes forgot to even use the bathroom. So, he decided to put on an act, pretending to be her daughter who had come to visit. The ugly creature started to fall for it, and the protagonist declared that, yes, he was her daughter, Xiafang. The woman, still confused, said she remembered her daughter being a bit fuller in the chest. But the protagonist quickly came up with another lie, saying, "Mom, you don't get it. This is what's trendy now. Those old, oversized clothes were for perverts." He then asked her what she had been doing earlier, but she didn't understand anything. It was all too strange. The old lady apologized, thinking the protagonist was one of the hospital caregivers. Hearing that, the protagonist was taken aback. "Wait, what do you mean hospital caregivers?" he asked, thinking they seemed like good people. But the old lady suddenly grew angry again, saying that the protagonist had been converted by them. Calmly, the protagonist asked, "What do you mean, converted? What are you talking about?" The old woman then explained that the caregivers there would hit people who didn't give them food, and sometimes they'd inject the elderly. Those who got the injections would die. This shocked the protagonist. He had just uncovered an important clue. The old lady then begged the protagonist to take her home, promising she wouldn't wet her pants again. The protagonist agreed to help, but said they needed to clean the room first. Hearing this, the old woman smiled and said her Xiafang was always so understanding. Later, in the hallway, the protagonist bumped into the director. He asked if she had any instructions, saying he'd carry them out immediately. She coldly told him to go pick up a batch of goods that had arrived at the entrance on the 5th floor, adding that he mustn't open any of the boxes. After she left, the protagonist wondered why she was acting so cold today and what was going on with the caregivers. Also, how had nobody died last night? A little while later, a car arrived at the front of the nursing home, and a man placed a package at the gate. The protagonist quickly noticed that this man was a stranger and didn't seem like a member of the nursing home staff. When the protagonist asked what the man was doing, the old man next to him said he couldn't tell him. The protagonist responded, "Obviously, you're a driver, but that's not what I'm asking. I want to know what's inside those boxes." Internally, the protagonist decided he wouldn't let the man leave without giving him some information. So, he casually said he wanted to smoke a cigarette first. The man quickly agreed, but when he asked where the cigarette was, the protagonist pointed to his own chest, where he already had one. The driver was caught off guard by this and started crying, but just like the meme where you throw cheese on a baby's face to stop them from crying, the protagonist threw some money at him, which instantly changed the man's mood. The driver declared it was all just a misunderstanding. Seeing the driver's reaction, the protagonist realized that money could make even the devil push a millstone. The driver driver's attitude completely changed, and now he was offering the protagonist a cigarette. But since the protagonist didn't have lungs, how could he smoke? So he politely declined. Quickly, the driver started explaining what was in the boxes. To sum it up, they contained some liquid medicine, mostly sedatives. The protagonist asked what the sedatives were for, and the driver explained that sometimes the elderly would misbehave, and that's when the injections were used to calm them down. It seemed to be true, considering it matched what the woman in room 204 had said. What was more suspicious, though, was that the director had specifically called someone to deliver these, which meant she probably intended to kill someone. At that moment, the driver commented that the protagonist must be new around there because he went out to check on the goods without fearing that thing. When the protagonist asked what thing he was talking about, the driver's face changed, and he quickly said he had already said too much. It was confidential. The protagonist responded, "No worries, my friend. So, what were you saying just now?" The protagonist didn't let up, even though he didn't really know what the money was for. He was just playing along. Faced with the cash, the driver's expression softened again, and he said that while it was confidential, the protagonist was like a brother to him, so he'd tell him everything he knew. The driver then started telling a story. A long time ago, there was a girl who was a bit different. To make money and care for her gravely ill mother, she gave up her bright future and chose to work as a caregiver in that very nursing home. At first, everything was fine, but one day, the girl's mother suddenly disappeared. When she was found again, her body had been dismembered and dumped in trash cans across the different floors of the building. After witnessing this horror, the girl lost her mind and jumped off the roof. That's when the protagonist realized that the ghost in the hallway was the girl's mother. But what happened after they found the culprit? Unfortunately, the driver just shrugged and said he was only a delivery guy and didn't know anything else. He had other deliveries to make, so he thanked the protagonist for all his help. Since the protagonist had given him so much money, the driver didn't want to leave without repaying the favor. So, he handed the protagonist a candle and a lighter, telling him to use them when climbing the stairs. After that, the protagonist rushed down to the second floor, and luckily, nothing crossed his path. The blood moon was still shining in the sky. He needed to go from the first floor to the fifth, and on the way, he could encounter that dismembered woman in the hallway. To prepare himself, he lit the candle that his brother, the driver, had given him. Moving like lightning, he began his climb. When he finally reached the top floor, a voice started speaking to him. It was the woman from the story, telling him to wait for her. The candle actually worked, just as the protagonist had hoped. He raised it high with all his strength and declared, "Oh, great dragon of all power, remove all evil from me." It seemed to work because the ghostly woman began to flee. Watching her run, the protagonist couldn't help but mutter, "Subarashi, amazing." As he moved forward, he noticed a trash can that looked like it had something in it. So, the driver hadn't lied to him after all. When the protagonist opened the trash can, he was horrified to find something inside, a strange face. In fact, it was the skin of that girl who had pretended to be his girlfriend. Apparently, she had been dismembered by the ghost from the stairs. Thankfully, the protagonist quickly closed the trash can in disgust, thinking, "What a nightmare." He then recalled something the old man had said, "When desires wrap too tightly around people, death becomes a release." Moving on, the protagonist arrived at the door of room 501, the only room on the fifth floor. What was odd, though, was that there was no information on the door, which meant the director hadn't assigned anyone to take care of the elderly person in that room. Or was she hiding something behind that door? Just as the protagonist was about to touch the doorknob, the director appeared and asked what he was doing, causing his heart, which technically didn't exist, to skip a beat. But as the king of improv, he quickly responded, "Oh, nothing, I just brought the box you asked for. Where should I put it?" The director instructed him to leave it in the hallway, which he did quickly. As he stood in the fifth floor corridor, the director called him over, saying it was time for his payment. But as she was about to hand it to him, something strange happened. Her form started to warp, almost like she was decomposing. Still smiling, the protagonist asked if she was feeling okay. That's when the director declared, "Oh, I forgot to tell you. When you reach the fifth floor, don't think you can make it out alive." The protagonist realized, well, of course, that's how this job goes. You work hard, and in the end, you don't even get paid because you'll be dead. Quickly, he grabbed his talisman, but the director lunged at him at an incredible speed. Because of her speed, he couldn't activate the talisman in time and barely managed to dodge, though he still got scratched. Now, the protagonist understood just how terrifyingly strong the director was. Those claws of hers were deadly. In other words, relying only on the power of the evil spirit wouldn't be enough. The director gave him no time to breathe, attacking again and telling him to die for her. She thought she had managed to grab him, but the protagonist had already vanished. He was having some sort of vision, although with the director being dead, it wasn't exactly a pleasant one. With fear gripping him, the protagonist protagonist bolted, knowing he wasn't dumb enough to take her on directly. There was only one way to resolve the crisis. Just like with the old man hiding in the curtains, he needed to block out the moonlight so it wouldn't affect the director. But he was out of luck. There were no curtains. At that moment, the director caught up to him from behind and said, "Ah, my dear, it seems it's not looking good for you. You must be so disappointed, so tired, and so oppressed. Let me end your sad and pathetic life." But as I mentioned, the protagonist is a master of improvisation. He suddenly shouted, "Hey, you guys, cut her down." Startled, the director asked who was behind her, to which the protagonist replied, "Your mom." Seriously, this guy is the king of improv. He really has no fear of death, or maybe he's just that good at winging it. Well, to be fair, it makes sense he wouldn't fear death, given that he's already dead. This guy's organs were gone, and he didn't even bat an eye. I guess he really is a badass. With that, the protagonist found an opening, but he had to act fast. After all, the timer on his evil spirit ability had less than a minute left, and if it ran out while the director was still around, it would be game over. Suddenly, the director clung to the ceiling like some kind of spider or lizard, who knows what kind of creature she had become. The protagonist quickly began thinking of his next move and decided to head for the only thing left on the floor, room 501. Without any hesitation, he kicked the door open, skipping the formalities, not even bothering to offer tea or anything. He was determined to uncover whatever secret the director was hiding in room 501. Clearly, she didn't want him to see it, but who cared about what she wanted? As soon as he entered the room, the evil spirit ability ran out, leaving him exhausted from the fight. Looking back, he was shocked and asked if what he was seeing was from the time when the director was still a caregiver. Suddenly, the scene shifted, as if they were transported into some sort of memory. The director was lying in a hospital bed beside a woman, who appeared to be her mother. The mother was saying she couldn't take it anymore. Then, the scene shifted again to an alley where the director was speaking with a man, begging him to lend her more money, promising she would pay him back in a few days. The man, however, wasn't having it and pushed her away. She had begged many people and borrowed all the money she could, but her mother's illness was incurable. It was like a bottomless pit. Finally, she made a decision, saying her mother would probably forgive her. Seeing this whole scene unfold before him, the protagonist was stunned. It turned out that the director was the girl the driver had mentioned, and the one who had killed her own mother. So, the ghost in the hallway was the director's mother. But how could she have cut up her own mother and scattered the pieces across the floors? The protagonist couldn't quite grasp it. Perhaps in the world of desires, strange and impossible things were normal. Maybe he couldn't apply common sense here. Before he knew it, they were back in the lobby on the first floor, where the old man was trying to calm everyone down. Based on his previous experience, he believed this challenge would end soon. Hearing this, the first person to get emotional was the pregnant woman. The old man explained that the director had said their task was to take care of the people in the 3 rooms, and today was supposed to be their last day. So, it seemed the challenge would be over soon, and everyone was overjoyed, thinking they would finally have their wishes granted. The old man confirmed it but reminded them, as he had before, to be careful what they wished for. However, the others didn't seem to care. They just wanted to go home. But for the protagonist, something felt off. It all seemed too simple. Just then, the director appeared. The protagonist noticed that once the blood moon had disappeared, she had returned to her normal self. The director then announced, "None of you died last night. Well, today I have your final task. Everything in this nursing home is done for the true clients, who are the children of these elderly people. Tomorrow morning, these children will visit, and your task is to inject the elderly with sedatives before their children arrive, so they remain quiet and obedient." Once again, she tossed papers into the air, each with a different number corresponding to a different room. She also reminded them that if they failed to complete this task and displeased the visiting children, it would be considered an unforgivable mistake. To leave, they had to inject the sedatives. Hearing this, the old man whispered to the protagonist that something was off. In the last challenge he participated in, there were more than 50 participants at the start, but you know how many survived to the end? Just 3. At that moment, the protagonist caught on and said, "You're suggesting that there are too many survivors this time?" The old man confirmed, adding that in the world of desires, few survive, and total annihilation is the norm. But this time, there were far too many survivors, which likely meant that tomorrow would be either the end of the challenge or the end of their lives. The protagonist then mentioned that he had a pretty good idea of what was in those boxes, problematic injections. The old man asked, "How do you know that? Don't tell me you're having an affair with the director." The protagonist shot back, "Get away from me with that nonsense. I want the director as far from me as possible. I only found out because the old lady told me last night that these injections seem to be fatal." Quickly understanding the situation, the old man agreed, stating that the final task wouldn't be easy, since the elderly wouldn't want to be injected. If they failed, those who couldn't complete the task would be killed. The protagonist responded that nothing was certain, and as he had said before, if they didn't inject the sedatives, they would likely be killed. Because of this, the protagonist advised the old man to warn everyone else, as he was more familiar with them. Before leaving, the protagonist grabbed the number for his room and internally wished everyone good luck. And so, he made his way to room 205. Oh, and on the instructions written on the door, here's a quick summary. The old man inside had some sort of mental illness, which was why he was tied to the bed all the time. If he ever got out of control, the note said to just talk about his son, and he'd calm down quickly. Oh, and of course, the protagonist was warned not to untie the old man. When the protagonist entered the room, the first thing the old man shouted was, "Let me out of these restraints. I'm fine, you crazy people. If you don't do it, I'll kill you all." The old man then transformed into some kind of chameleon or maybe a lizard with a giant tongue of all things, but the protagonist easily dodged the attack. Instead of grabbing the old man's tongue, he pulled on his restraints and calmly said, "Relax, old man, take it easy." But something still seemed off. Internally, the protagonist wondered if he had made a mistake. Quickly, he pulled out his talisman, thinking that if he did anything wrong, he might get hit. However, the old man yelled, "I'm not trying to do anything. You're stepping on my tongue." Being the kind soul he is, the protagonist helped the old man tuck his tongue back into his mouth. A little while later, the old man repeated, "Can't you see? I'm a normal person." The protagonist just agreed, nodding along to everything he said. The old man, though, wasn't buying it. "Oh, you're just saying that. I know deep down you still think I'm crazy," he said. The protagonist found this funny. After all, how could he believe that when he didn't even have a heart? The old man replied, "Look at that. You're lying to me again. How can someone not have a heart? You're the crazy one." At that point, the protagonist, getting a bit fed up, started taking off his clothes to show the stitches on his body. Seeing the sutures, even the old man exclaimed, "Wow, what a cool zipper you've got there." Upon closer inspection, he added, "Fashion these days is really strange." Since the old man had become a bit more calm, the protagonist decided it was a good time to get some information. He joked that now that the old man had seen his stitches, they were officially friends. The protagonist then asked, "My dear friend, let me ask you, when you said, 'He deserves to die,' who were you talking about?" But the question didn't land well. The old man went berserk, and the protagonist wondered if it had something to do with his son. Hearing the mention of his son, the old man grew even more furious, yelling that he should kill him. The old man attacked again, but the protagonist shouted that his son was already dead, which immediately stopped the old man in his tracks. The truth was, the protagonist didn't actually know that. He just said it to calm the situation. The old man, shocked, asked, "What do you mean, my son's dead?" The protagonist, playing it cool, said, "Yeah, what's the problem with that?" The old man calmed down a bit and said, "Well, that is a problem." The protagonist then casually asked him to explain the situation. The old man began to recount the story. That year, his mother had fallen gravely ill, and the doctor said she could be saved if they came up with 800,000 yuan. Originally, the old man planned to sell his house to save her, but his son refused. In the end, the son chose to keep the house instead of saving his precious mother, and the old man was thrilled that his son had finally died. Seeing the old man's reaction, the protagonist realized his lie had gone way too far. Out of nowhere, the old man stopped laughing and said, "Tomorrow is family visit day, right?" The protagonist figured he knew what the old man was getting at, but the old man continued, saying the protagonist was a good person and wished him luck because it seemed they were all getting ready to say goodbye. The protagonist was confused and asked what he meant. The old man explained that every time there was a family visit, the caregivers were replaced and many of the elderly people would disappear. Once, the place had been lively, but now it was obvious things had taken a dark turn. And so, the third night came to an end. The next morning, the children of the elderly arrived, many of them asking where their parents were. However, they suddenly heard a scream. When they rushed to the rooms, they found their parents dead. The children began to shout that this nursing home was heartless and that whoever had taken care of their parents deserved to die. One by one, the caregivers started dying. Watching all this unfold from above, the director began to speak. "Born with nothing, die with nothing. In the end, we all turn to dust." And with that, she declared, "Let the massacre begin."